I know. I start a lot of my videos off like this. Walking into the workshop, carrying whatever it is I'm going to work on. I just got back from Home Depot and I bought a sheet of plexiglass. So I guess you know I'm going to try and fix the broken glass on that clock that I just made. I was just noticing that there's a couple of places where I'm wondering if maybe the plexiglass may have got scratched here. So I'm going to have to cut accordingly to get around this. On the other hand, maybe it's just the protective plastic that's damaged, and the plexiglass itself might be okay. I hope that's the case. Anyway, let's see what we can do. Now it is just unbelievable to me that I knew that this little spacer was touching the glass. But somehow I thought because it's wood and not metal, it wouldn't crack. But it did. When I tightened these screws down, it cracked. Well, I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to be able to take this entire piece of glass out in one piece. This crack is going to follow along somewhere here, so I may as well put pressure on it and just see where it goes. Well, that's where it went. Now, working with glass is not my cup of tea, and I'm hoping that if I score the glass, I'll be able to take it out in chunks. Well, it's going to be interesting to see. Is the silicone going to stick to the wood, or is it going to stick to the glass? It's stuck to the glass. Well, I guess I shouldn't sound surprised because that stain was an oil base, so I guess the wood was a little bit greasy. Naturally, the silicone isn't going to want to stick to it. Now, surprisingly, there are very few places that I have to actually do any cleanup. And this spot right here is the worst. And that's pretty painless. There, it's as good as new. This plexiglass is not cheap. It works out to about 5 cents per square inch. And we've got 9 by 14 times 5 cents. So that's $6.30 for a piece of plexiglass to fit this. Now, mind you, the glass was $20. $20 exactly, as a matter of fact. And so the plexiglass is cheaper. Now, I know glass is actually nicer, but this is going to have to do. I'm probably going to start using plexiglass on all my clocks from now on, because it's easy to cut myself. I don't mean cut myself, I mean it's easy to cut myself. Now my plan is I want to just leave the line. And that way, if it's a little bit too big, I can always trim it down. You know, this is just way too awkward. I can't reach over there to hold it down. I'm going to have to find another way to cut this other line. You know, I realized afterwards that I could have used one of my roller stands and then sort of stood beside it. That would have really worked well. Should have thought of it. Well, I know the table saw works good on this. I've used the table saw several times for cutting plexiglass. I know a bandsaw also works, but I've never used a jigsaw. So this is going to be new for me. And for sure I don't want to cut into my table saw. Now the reason I'm showing you this is because when I was going along with the jigsaw, at about this point I started pushing really hard to try and make it go faster. And I noticed a little crack starting. And as soon as I saw that, then I backed off on the pressure. And the rest of the cut went okay. So I guess a jigsaw can be used, but you got to be careful not to press too hard. Well, width-wise it's perfect. Lengthwise it's got to lose about 1/16 of an inch. So I'll take it off this side here, where it's kind of ragged anyway. Well, if you were watching the blade, you probably noticed that I took off a little more than 1/16 of an inch there, more like about 1/8. So that's why I'm using these little shims here, just to help center the plexiglass on the frame. The width was perfect, I just had to sort of wedge it in place there. Now as you can see right through the plexiglass, down into this rabbited area here, and I can see where I would have to make my cut so that the plexiglass will fit into the slot. So I want the plexiglass to be just slightly smaller. I'll just score it like this. I think this will work okay. Now of course right here where the label was, I had to peel the label back and score directly on the plexiglass itself. I was hoping not to have to take this protective plastic off until I was completely finished here. But I'll just put it back here for the moment. Now you probably noticed when I was cutting that plexiglass on the table saw that the blade, as well as cutting, it also melted the plastic. And I don't want to get that molten plastic gumming up the underside here of my bandsaw. So I'm not going to use the bandsaw. I was thinking about it, but I've changed my mind. Now you're probably wondering, what's this red strap for? Well, that's just to help remind me to retension the blade before I turn the bandsaw on. I do the same thing on my other bandsaw as well. All of these cuts are going to be 30 degrees off of a right angle. So I just set the miter gauge here at 60 instead of 90, and hopefully by flipping the glass one way or the other, it should give me a nice straight cut at just the exact right angle. Okay, I'm sure you got the idea. Now I had deliberately cut this too big, because I knew I could always trim those angles that I felt had to be trimmed. Like I've said before, I can always take it off, but I can't put it back. Well, that's not too bad. Now the plexiglass, as the glass was before it, is a little bit proud of the frame. So I'll probably have to use my shims again. And this time I'm going to trim the shims. As you can see, in order for the holes to line up, I have to take off about 1/16 of an inch here. And maybe this might be a good time to comment on a question that was asked. And that is, why do I not rabbet out right here so that the hinge will be flush? And in other words, that the door will be flush with the case. Well, this hinge is a, I think they call it a non-mortising hinge. It's very, very thin. Just measure it and see. I hope you can see that. It's well under 1/16 of an inch thick. Now my thinking here is that if I have this little shim sandwiched between these two pieces of wood, there's less of a danger of taking too much off, or maybe breaking the little piece of wood. Okay, that's perfect. Well, I think we're ready to take the plastic off. Well, now the moment of truth. Did Home Depot sell me a good piece or a bad piece? Well, this side looks perfect. I see something right there. Don't know what that is. It's very, very tiny. I don't think you're going to notice it once it's mounted in the frame. Well, there is a little tiny blemish right there, but you have to have the light just right to see it. Oh, there it is. But I have to use my macro lens so that you can see it. It's like there was a little bubble or something perhaps in the plastic there when it was poured, or however they make this stuff. To give you an idea just how small that is, I'm going to put the head of a pin right there. Well, I guess I can live with that. Now, because this plexiglass scratch is so easy, when I put the silicone around the outside here, I'm going to do it sparingly this time. And that way, I won't have a whole bunch of squeeze out that I have to later trim off. Okay, we'll check it in the morning. Well, it's the next morning. Hey, I've done this before too, right? Anyway, let's see what we got. Well, I think with a little cleanup, it's going to be ready to mount back onto the case. And I don't have a whole bunch of squeeze out to contend with either. And I definitely don't want to forget our little shims here. Yeah, that's 13 thousandths of an inch. And it just barely goes underneath there. But not there. Well, I guess I'm going to have to make sure that I don't tighten the screws real tight. Well, they don't have to be real tight. I'll just do it by hand here. That one is pretty tight. That should be okay. I don't think that's going to crack anything. Okay, let's hang it back up on the wall, see what we got. Well, you know, I cannot tell that that is not glass. And that little tiny blemish that we saw, I can't see it even though I know it's there. This should look familiar. This is how I started this video about, 7 weeks ago now. And, you know, we've got 17 clocks in the house. I don't need another clock. So I wanted to give it to the guy who gave me this Scrapwood. He's a neighbor. And, you know, the other day we changed to daylight savings time. I had 17 clocks to change. 5 of them are right here in my workshop. So, anyway, this video has finally come to an end. And I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you for watching.